Imagine for a second that every single screen in this room goes black. Your phone dies. The lights cut out. Even the electric cars outside turn into very expensive paperweights. We'd be sitting here in the dark, probably wondering how on earth we're going to survive the next 10 minutes without TikTok. We take it for granted, don't we? We flick a switch and the world wakes up. But that magic didn't come from a billionaire in Silicon Valley or a wizard at Hogwarts. It came from a guy who started his career literally sweeping floors and dusting book covers. Today, I want to talk to you about Michael Faraday. You might recognize the name from a physics textbook, usually attached to some law that looked terrifying during an exam. But Faraday wasn't a textbook kind of guy. He was a dropout, a dreamer, and arguably the most disciplined human being to ever walk into a laboratory. Michael wasn't born into a life of luxury. He grew up in London in the 1790s, the son of a blacksmith who was often too sick to work. His family was so poor that Michael was once given one loaf of bread to last him an entire week. At 13, he had to leave school to earn money. He got a job as an apprentice to a bookbinder. Now, if most of us were surrounded by thousands of books all day, we might use them to build a fort or a comfortable place to nap. But Michael, he read them. Every single one that came across his workbench. He didn't have a tutor. He didn't have YouTube tutorials. He just had curiosity. He'd finish binding a book on chemistry and think, I wonder if that's actually true. And then he'd go home and try to replicate the experiments with old bottles and scraps of wood. One day, a customer gave him a ticket to see a lecture by Sir Humphrey Davy, the rock star scientist of the age. Michael sat in the front row, mesmerized. But he didn't just watch. He took 300 pages of meticulous notes, bound them into a beautiful book, and sent them to Davy with a letter basically saying, please hire me. I'll do anything. Davy initially said no, but then, in a stroke of luck, if you can call it that, Davy partially blinded himself in a lab explosion. He needed a secretary who understood science. He remembered the kid with the 300 pages of notes. Faraday was it. Faraday's journey wasn't a straight line to success. Because he came from a lower class and lacked a formal math education, the elite scientists of London looked down on him. They treated him like a servant. On a tour of Europe, Davy's wife even made Faraday eat with the servants because she didn't think he was gentlemanly enough to sit at the table. Did he quit? No. He used that time to learn French and Italian and meet the greatest minds in Europe. His biggest challenge, however, was his own mind. Later in life, Faraday suffered a massive nervous breakdown and permanent memory loss. He would forget what he had done an hour ago. He had to write notes to himself, just to remember where he left his tools. Imagine trying to discover the laws of the universe when you can't remember where you put your keys. Yet, he pushed through for decades, relying on his ironclad discipline to keep his research going. Faraday's success wasn't a eureka moment in the bathtub. It was the result of a grueling daily routine. He arrived at the Royal Institution early, worked late, and recorded every single failure. And there were thousands. He once spent 10 years trying to prove that a magnet could create electricity. For a decade, people told him he was wasting his time. But Faraday believed in the unity of nature. He believed that if electricity could make a magnet move, a magnet should be able to make electricity move. In 1831, he finally figured it out. He moved a magnet through a coil of wire, and a needle on his meter flickered. That tiny flicker is why we have power plants, refrigerators, and iPhones today. Work, finish, publish. This was Faraday's personal motto. It's simple, right? But think about how often we start something. A workout plan, a new hobby, a coding project, and never finish it. Faraday's secret wasn't being a genius. It was finishing what he started. Despite becoming one of the most famous men in the world, Faraday stayed incredibly grounded. He turned down a knighthood. He turned down the presidency of the Royal Society. Twice. He just wanted to be plain Michael Faraday. He was also famous for his Christmas lectures for children. He loved to make science fun. Once, while explaining static electricity, he had a young boy sit on an insulated stool and charged him up until the kid's hair stood straight up on end. He was essentially the original science guy. He even had a sense of humor about his lack of math skills. He once said that if he couldn't explain a concept in simple English, he didn't truly understand it. He used to say, "I am no poet, but if you think for yourselves as I proceed, the facts will form a poem in your minds." He knew he wasn't the smartest guy in the room by academic standards, and he was totally okay with that. He let his experiments do the talking. To understand Faraday, you have to look at the principles he lived by. Here are a few of his most powerful quotes. He said, "Nothing is too wonderful to be true if it be consistent with the laws of nature." Meaning, don't limit your imagination. If the world works a certain way, even the wildest ideas, like wireless energy, are possible. He said, "The secret is comprised in 3 words: work, finish, publish." Meaning, talent is common, completion is rare. The world only rewards what you actually put out there. He said, "But still try, for who knows what is possible." Meaning, this was his response to failure. It's an invitation to curiosity over fear. He said, "A man who is certain he is right is almost sure to be wrong." Meaning, stay humble. The moment you think you know everything, you stop learning. He said, "Lectures which really teach will never be popular. Lectures which are popular will never really teach." Meaning, true growth requires effort. If it's easy and fun all the time, you're probably just being entertained, not transformed. He said, "I will simply keep at it." Meaning, this was his mantra during those 10 years of failed magnetic experiments. Persistence is often just showing up one more time. The Faraday cage. Have you ever noticed your cell phone doesn't work well in an elevator? That's the Faraday cage effect. He discovered that a metal enclosure blocks electric fields. The Queen's guest. Queen Victoria was such a fan that she gave him a house for free for his retirement. He turned down blood money. During the Crimean War, the British government asked Faraday to help develop chemical weapons. He flat out refused on ethical grounds. He cared more about humanity than a paycheck. So, why does a guy who lived 200 years ago matter to you? Because Michael Faraday proves that where you start has nothing to do with where you can go. He was a poor kid with a speech impediment and no high school diploma. He didn't have a network or a brand. He had a bookbinder's workbench and an obsession with how the world works. You are living in an age where information is everywhere. You don't have to bind books to read them. You have the entire library of human knowledge in your pocket. The only thing missing sometimes is the Faraday factor, that relentless, stubborn discipline to keep trying when the needle doesn't move the first 1,000 times. The next time you feel like you aren't smart enough or connected enough to succeed, remember the blacksmith's son. Remember the man who sat with the servants but ended up lighting the world. Your life is a series of experiments. Some will fail. Some will be boring. But if you keep moving the magnet, eventually, you're going to find your spark. Go out there and finish what you start.